Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Test, test, test. 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Testing.
Good morning. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is the regular meeting of the Venice City Council. Today is May 28th, 2019. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Cotero?
Here.
Mr. Newsom?
Here.
Mr. Daniels?
Here.
Ms. Fiedler? Ms. Gates? Ms. Moore? Mayor Hollick?
Here. We'll start with invocation, and then we'll have the pledge. This morning we'll have the pledge led by Dr. William Jervey, our generous benefactor that helped us get a beautiful library in town.
Father, help us recognize things as they are in our city, and that we may work together to build here a genuine community of concern for all the people, one that may serve as an example for others across the state to imitate. Bless these men and women who together are striving to lead this city through the complex political process into a better day. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Go ahead, Dr. Jervey.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, that's all right. Excuse me, Ed. Well, again, good morning, and I'd like to start off this morning with a presentation from the Venice Historic Preservation Board and the City of Venice, honoring a young lady that we lost way too early in life, Carolyn Redlin. Those of you that may have known Carolyn, you only had to know her once because you'd never forget her. Quite an active lady, women's club in the Historic Society, but wherever she went, she was a presence that was felt by all. So I'm going to have Jean Trammell come forward to read this Legacy Award, and I'd like to have the friends and family of Carolyn to come forward, please. Give you.
Yeah, I even
Got it. Good.
New technology.
Yep. And if you'd like to just sweep back in here, and those that were closest to Carolyn, if they'd come
Come on, you come here.
come up to by Jean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Need to get back.
Okay, come up on the other side of Jean Trammell, if you would. We'll you get in there because.
Come on, Hannah. Is this everybody? Okay. On behalf of the Venice Historic Preservation Board and the City of Venice, I'm very proud to present the Venice Legacy Award to Carolyn Redlin. Carolyn was born in Turtle Creek, Pennsylvania on August 27, 1953, and raised in Northridge, California. Carolyn had a fulfilling career as an information systems executive for several technology and healthcare companies across the United States. Carolyn retired as Assistant Vice President, Information Systems Executive for MedStar Health in Columbia, Maryland, and relocated to Venice in 2009 with her partner and fiancé, Thomas J. Doherty. Carolyn loved Venice and its history. She was very active in the organizations that drew community members together for the betterment of the community and promotion of the city's history. Carolyn served as a director of the Venice Newcomers Club, a volunteer and supporter of Venice Area Beautification, Inc., and as a downtowner volunteer and public director of Venice Main Street. Carolyn also served as a two-term president of the Venice Nokomis Women's Club from 2014 through 2016. The Venice Nokomis Women's Club, founded in 1926, is the oldest community organization in Venice, and Carolyn took special pride in fusing the energies and talents of the club's longtime members with her generation of Venice women to accomplish a wide variety of projects and activities for the betterment of the Venice community. Carolyn also served as president of the Venice Area Historical Society and was instrumental in finalizing the purchase of the Ringling Circus train car, which is currently being restored. Once completed, it will then be gifted to Sarasota County for permanent display at the historic Venice Train Depot. In the middle of her second term, health issues forced her to resign her presidency, and she passed away on February 27, 2018, in Severn, Maryland. Carolyn not only loved Venice and its history, but her infectiousness, enthusiasm, and outgoing personality drew many to the causes and activities she promoted and led. Okay. Tom, will you accept this, please?
I will accept it, Jean. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciated.
Very much appreciated. Carolyn always gave so much to all the projects that she worked on, and she was especially fond, I think, of Venice's history.
She was indeed, Jean. Thank you. And Mayor Hollick and members of the council, thank you. And Jean and Historic Preservation Board, thank you. On behalf of my partner and fiance, Carolyn Redlin, I'm honored to accept this award with the members of her Venice family that are with me here today. I talked to her sister about this, and her sister told me, listen, can't come down, but this award honors Carolyn for her work in Venice and should be accepted by her Venice family. And with me here today are part of that family, Betty Intagliata, who first ignited Carolyn's interest in history and preservation, and Clark Presley, who stoked it with his wonderful reports on the buildings, the older buildings in Venice, and then kindly stepped in to serve as president following her passing. And her best girlfriends with me, Gina Hildegast, Rose Bridges, Lise Mills, who supported her in all of her historic preservation work and held her hand and held her spirit in that final illness. And so on behalf of Carolyn Redlin, I know she'd be very proud and honored with this award. And the members of her family, Venice family, are here today, are honored to accept it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You can lead the parade.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Tom.
Thank you, Mayor.
Carolyn will be missed, but I think more importantly, Carolyn will be remembered. Gene, you want to give me that mic?
Be happy to give it to you.
Could be embarrassing. We're going to go on with the agenda, and with one change, if there is no objection from council, since Jean Trammell is here this morning, and she is also a presenter for the Historic Board, the activity of the Historic Preservation Board and the Public Art Advisory Board. And that's it at 1 o'clock. We don't really know if the meeting is going to go on that long. She won't be able to make it back before then. I'd like, if there's no objection, right after audience participation, we'll go on to Jean's presentation and then go on with the agenda. Okay, thank you.
Mayor, that would be right now because there is no audience participation.
No audience participation. That was quick. Well, let me go through my little spiel on what you do when you're, no, I won't even do that. What I meant to say is let's call Jean forward, and Jean, if you would come and let us know what Historic Preservation Board and what the Public Art Board. Jean serves as the chair of both boards.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning and welcome.
I currently chair the Venice Historic Preservation Advisory Board. We are one of the older advisory boards, I think, of the City Council. We originally started out as the Historic Commission, and then we were an advisory committee, and then you promoted us to being an advisory board, which we very much appreciated. It took a little while for us to gear up into some of the activities that were really needed by the city. Needless to say, the city is unique because of the John Nolan plan and the fact that over the years the city has been to such pains to preserve as much of the plan as possible, because it is what makes Venice the unique place it is to visit and live in. This past year, with your help, and after a number of years, we finally got a tax incentive plan approved for the city of Venice, and we're very grateful and very, very excited about us. That took us a number of years to get that in place to bring it to you. And we're just thrilled that we're finally going to be able to start working with some of the historic property owners to utilize this to help preserve our heritage here in Venice. We recently helped host the Certified Local Government Workshop that was held here in town. A couple of you actually managed to visit the workshop. I know that they came and did a special presentation before City Council, so hopefully they answered all your questions about certified local government, because we see that as an exciting new prospect in our future. You've just seen the Legacy Awards. Every year we try to recognize people in the community in the past who are working to help us preserve our heritage, or who were a significant factor in creating what we consider our history. And we were very proud to recognize Carolyn this morning. She did not live in our community that long, but while she was here, she very much embraced the history of Venice and was very active in doing things to help the community recognize it. Let's see. We help Harry with a number of proclamations throughout the year to help people remember that it's Museum Day and Historic Preservation Day and all the other significant days that there are for us to remember, because we like to consider a large part of what we like to think we are doing is we are educating our community about historic preservation. We're helping people who are trying to do things to preserve historic buildings. We'd like to think we're a large influence in that area. And we're just very, very proud of our work. Now that we've got the tax incentive ordinance laid to bed, we have started to work on revising our current historic preservation ordinance. That was an ordinance that was put together a number of years ago, and it was done very rapidly at the time because, of course, you were doing a number of other ones to get other historic advisory boards put together. And so we have a very basic bones historic preservation ordinance. We are currently researching a large number of other cities and seeing what they have in their ordinances, how they've worded things, how it's worked for their cities, if it didn't work, and if we think it might work here. We hope in just a few months to be able to present that to the City Council for review and approval. We are working closely with the planners in the city and the Planning Advisory Board to try to bring it to their attention so they have an opportunity to give us input early on so there are no surprises for either of us as we try to move this forward. One of the reasons for trying to get this moved forward as rapidly as possible is because we are eager to apply to get the final entitlement of CLG, and there are things that have to be in our ordinance in order for us to qualify for that. So that is probably our primary piece of work at the moment. I think we've always had a very open relationship with the City Council. Historic preservation ties into a lot, and so there's a lot of little detailed projects that seem to be going on all the time, and we try to keep you apprised so that there are no surprises. But in the last couple years, I think our city has taken several serious strides forward in recognizing how important historic preservation is to our city. And personally, with the way things have gone the last couple years, and with the quality of the people we've had here on City Council, I expect that to continue going forward. We're very fortunate that we have Harry Klinkhammer as our Director of Historic Resources now. Harry has been a very, very hard worker. He's always responsive to us. He's very good at researching things and bringing us a number of things to look at, to study, to research, and to have some options for us when we're thinking about things that we should be doing. So we're very, very appreciative of his help. Our staff person who keeps records of our minutes has done very well by us. She's, quite frankly, I think, gotten quite a thorough education in Venice history, sitting in that position, and we appreciate her. Right at the moment, we meet monthly. I personally feel that that should continue because we have so many things that are starting to bubble up that we're working on. Unless we cannot have, say, a summer meeting or a holiday meeting because of lack of quorum, I am still very much in favor of monthly meetings. I personally think, and that's because I've dedicated my time to it, that this is one of the more important advisory committees for the City Council, and I hope that we're going to be continuing forward. Questions?
I have one, but Mr. Daniels, go ahead.
I just have a comment to make. Gene, I truly appreciate all you've done, and coming from a historical city where I lived for several years in German Village in Columbus, I really value this piece of history, and that's one of my criteria for selecting Venice. But the other thing I just want to say for the record here, I'm looking forward. Harry and I had coffee for 2 hours at McDonald's when he first came into town, and we talked about issues, and I'm looking forward to getting the Heidel House finished next door in our what I call the campus plan with the fire station addition going on and so forth. As you know, that's been like Mary, we came into office for some reason, it stood there, and you worked out with our city attorney whatever issues was going on, but that's really a beautiful facility there, and the parking lot and some other things that the city's going to be doing here. I'm just really looking forward to seeing that come to reality, where it's part of our campus and so forth here. And I appreciate all you've done and all the others in the historical board. It's really a pleasure to live in a historical city, and thank you for helping me put the little sign on the freeway. I never thought I'd get that done with FDOT, but anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels. Anyone else? Mr. Cotero?
You know, besides all the good work that your board does, I think it's important to note that one of the requirements, and correct me if I'm wrong, Harry, one of the requirements of certified local governments and to be eligible for those grants, the CLG grants, is to have an active historic advisory board, historic preservation advisory board. So as a member of certified local governments, this is, you know, we need to have this board. It's definitely a needed board. It needs to, besides all the good work they do, in order to be eligible for these grants, it needs to be a working, active board. Correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I have two questions for you, Jean.
Okay.
Number one, the historic preservation, I believe, is charged with the Association of Nolan Communities, inviting in, and not only inviting in, but if there's another invitee, addressing that invitee to make sure that their association with the communities is in fact accurate. Is there anything moving forward on that?
Well, I know that we've sent out some additional invitations and we have a place on our agenda every month to get an update on that. I have not heard of any responses recently. We are narrowing down a little bit the scope of the idea for the design of the sign that we'd like to share with all of the cities that we bring into this organization. But that's really all the updates I have, unless Harry has heard anything more.
Good morning. For the record, Harry Klinkhammer, Historical Resources Manager for the City of Venice. Currently, we have 3 communities in the Association of Nolan Communities project going forward. It's Venice, Mariemont, Ohio, and Kingsport, Tennessee. We're currently waiting to get an application in from Asheville, North Carolina, and I've also reached out to Madison, Wisconsin. Have not heard back from them. However, a fellow graduate student of mine is the current historic preservation planner for the city of Madison, just started there last month. So I'll be reaching out to her again to see if maybe that has a little bit more traction. So we've also sent out invitations to the Myers Park community, where we've not yet gotten response back from anyone over there. So far we are looking at 3 definite communities that we have on board and another 2 that we're looking to bring on board.
Thank you. If I might suggest San Diego, and I just had it a second ago, it'll be back, and I'll yell it out.
Yeah, we did some research and we have a master list.
Oh, Sarasota.
We have a master list that we're working off of. So,
Yeah, especially the close by one. If I remember correctly, Nolan did 20 some odd communities in Florida.
Not sure if it was quite that many in Florida, but he did do quite a few.
So I just think that once this thing catches on and people start seeing the sign in the various communities, that's going to be a natural for doing summer vacations to various Nolan communities to see the similarities. So, but thank you for doing that. Gene, one more question for you. We've had a couple of our advisory boards. One has asked to go into a hibernation period. Another I'll report on today. One of the things that came up was perhaps there could be better communication between council and the board. Is there something that we can do as city council or something that you need from city council as far as communications go to make both our job and your job easier and more effective?
No, I think between Harry and Mr. Cautero, quite frankly, we get pretty regular communication on what's happening. And they've certainly been very good at taking our message forward to you and to other staff or departments.
That's what I'm getting from the other boards, is the liaison is tremendously important. And one of the reasons we went to liaison from ex officio was so that liaison could literally sit anywhere in the city, anywhere at all, and have communication, telephone calls and so forth without violation of sunshine laws. So I'm glad to hear that. Rich, way to go. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you very much. You can go to your next board now if you like.
Yes. Okay, I also serve as the chairman of the Public Art Advisory Board. The Public Art Advisory Board is not anywhere near as old as the Historic Preservation Advisory Board. We've really only been in existence for a short number of years. We also were started out with a very basic public art ordinance, which is what we have been functioning under. We have just recently started work on a revision of the public art ordinance. We are going to be working on that. You will not see it as soon as you will see the one on historic preservation. We're just starting. But we also, quite frankly, are surveying other cities with public art programs, looking over their ordinances, finding things that would serve the city of Venice, those that would not. And it's an interesting procedure. We meet in a publicly advertised little task force meeting about once a month, and we start working on this a little bit at a time. Primarily, the Public Art Advisory Board has been responsible to review proposed public art projects for the city of Venice. Most of the projects that have been brought to us, we have approved. Some we've had a pretty close split vote on. There have been a couple which we totally declined to approve to the city council, and they graciously disappeared from view, and we were happy and content. Considering, once again, how unique Venice is, and one of the things everyone always says about this is just how pretty, how beautiful the city of Venice is. And of course, with all the natural beauty that we have in this city, it's just the natural thing for us to complement it with man-made public art. And that's what we want to see happen in Venice. We want to have it be, I hate the word appropriate, but I can't think of a better one, art for our city. We have areas of the city which of course are historic themed, and any art that is placed within those themed districts, we want to be a complement, not jarring to our historic ambiance. There are other sections of the city which are quite frankly pretty wide open as to what type of art we could place in there. And we're looking forward to seeing a more diverse palette to be presented to us in the future. So far, I think we've been helpful to the people who have brought projects to us. Right at the moment, the majority of our public art in the city of Venice is privately funded. The city has no funding mechanism to help support public art. It's something that we hope to write into the proposed ordinance that we'll be bringing back to you later. Harry, did I overlook anything?
No?
Happy to have for questions.
Any questions for public art? Mr. Cotero?
Yeah, just a couple of observations. This board meets, I'm the liaison to this board also. It meets quarterly rather than monthly.
Yeah, we voluntarily shifted to quarterly because we don't have that heavy a traffic at this point in time.
Right. It's quarterly and as needed.
Yes.
And recently, you were heavily involved in the mural downtown. I believe you had a joint workshop and meeting with Venice Main Street to go over the facets and aspects of that mural. So there's also heavy interface with other boards in the city.
Yeah, Venice Main Street had a challenge because of the schedule of the grants and the money and when the project had to be completed by. So we called for an extra special meeting in order to conduct business for them.
Mr. Daniels?
I will say this, you've all done a very good job preserving the unique character of Venice. A colleague of mine used to sit up here, he used to say, we've done a good job of not screwing it up. In our travels, I remember that statement.
A little touch here, a little touch there. It all makes a difference.
Yes, and thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Harry? Let's move back to the regular order of the agenda. We're on the consent section. The consent section are matters that are routine and considered routine in nature and do not require a debate by council. If there is an item that council would like to discuss, a council member will ask for that to be removed from the consent section. Is there anyone wishing to remove an item from consent? Seeing none, the chair will entertain a motion for approval.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the items in the consent agenda.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Gates, seconded by Ms. Fiedler. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Chair was aye. It does pass unanimously. Move to public hearings. Ordinance number 2019-18. This is quasi-judicial procedure. We will open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak must fill out a speaker card. Speakers' cards are up by the city clerk. City attorney, would you please inquire as to conflicts of interest and ex parte communication?
If anyone has had any ex parte communications or has any possible conflicts of interest, please place them on the record at this time.
I attended the hearing with the Planning Commission on this matter.
I threw some dirt for the groundbreaking.
Yes.
Dirty through, I threw back.
All right. No one else is speaking, so we're ready to go.
Thank you. Is there any written communication?
Yes, the written communication was included in the agenda packet.
Thank you. We'll do a staff presentation, and I would like a staff presentation, so I think that would probably be good on everyone's part.
Coming. Trying to get your time.
Thanks, Ross.
Good afternoon. Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of council, city attorney, charter officers, and members of the public. For the record, Roger Clark, planning manager, and I have signed the speaker's card. This is a presentation for Sarasota Memorial Hospital. The owner is Sarasota County Public Hospital Board, and the agent for the owners is Dan Bailey of the Williams Parker Law Firm. This is a rezoning petition that you're going to hear today. Start out with a little background on the property itself. November 26th of 2002, the property was annexed through Ordinance 2002-48. March of the following year, comprehensive plan amendment from county commercial center to city commercial designation was achieved, and then a couple years later in March, the property was rezoned to planned commercial development through ordinance number 2005-12. In August of 2005, property was purchased by Sarasota County Public Hospital Board, and March 5th of 2007, site development plan petition number 07-3SP was submitted to construct non-hospital medical facilities. The next activity was August of 2012 when that site development plan was approved by Planning Commission. There's quite a time frame in here. In the middle of these years, there was some issues, some objection from Venice Regional Medical Center at that time, and this project went through some different types of issues. Finally, on September 11th, April 28th of 2016, the agent did direct staff to close that site and development petition. On September 11th of 2018, the pre-annexation agreement for the property was amended, removing the Venetian Gateway standards for signage and architectural standards from hospitals and related healthcare facilities. And then finally, on November 28th, the current petition was filed. It was filed along with a site and development plan and a special exception that has been to Planning Commission, has been approved, contingent on the rezoning being approved by City Council. On your screen is an aerial photo of the subject property. Give you just a little bit of orientation here. The property is highlighted in green. The city boundary kind of blocks it out there a little bit, but this is Pine Brook Road, north and south, Laurel Road going east and west, I-75 in this area. And this is the subject hospital property, Plaza Venezia Shopping Center over here to the west. It's a photo of the site as it appears. As indicated in the staff report, land clearing and some foundation work are being accomplished through an agreement with the city that if the project approvals are not obtained, the city will be held harmless and the site will be restored to its previous condition. This was requested by the applicant in order for them to stay on a tight schedule provided by the state as part of their approval process. This chart was included in the staff report, identifies the adjacent properties along with their existing uses and zoning and land use designations to the north. You've got some vacant property up there, Sarasota County government use. It is designated as residential in the comp plan. To the west, as I indicated and pointed out, the Plaza Venezia Shopping Center. It's zoned commercial general, and it is in the mixed use corridor. To the south, you have some residential, some large lot residential county properties zoned OUE, and you also have some residential multifamily 1 properties that are in the city immediately adjacent to the south, and the designations are county and city, moderate density residential, and then obviously to the east you have the interstate. Future land use designation of the property is mixed use corridor, and the current zoning, as I indicated, is planned commercial development. It is important to note that this designation will not change. It's just going to be a new binding master plan that will be associated with this property in order to achieve the project that the applicants have submitted. As I indicated, it is a zoning amendment. This is kind of a quick summary. It's a zoning amendment to amend the existing planned commercial development district zoning of the subject property to allow for the proposed uses of hospital and related healthcare facilities. The owner, as I indicated, Sarasota County Public Hospital Board. The property size is about 65 acres. It is also a mixed-use corridor land use designation. It is in the Laurel Road neighborhood as established by the comprehensive plan, and we will have an amended PCD if this project gets approved. This map depicts the resulting zoning map. If the petition is approved, you can see the designation will not change and will remain PCD. The proposed binding master plan consists of multiple documents. They are included on your screen. There are 4 sheets that are entitled Binding Master Plan, Sarasota Memorial Hospital, Venice. These were all provided in your agenda packet. It does have a cover sheet that provides development data. It also includes a conceptual site plan for the project, has cross sections regarding perimeter buffering, and also gives some typicals of the parking fields for this project. There are also some parking sections that are depicting the vehicular movements through the property, a sign plan that is very detailed, architectural control narrative for the project, site lighting narrative, a sign narrative, and also civil and landscape design and zoning control narrative. These are all part of the binding master plan for the project. On your screen is the development data from both the existing PCD and the proposed PCD. You'll see on the left-hand side of your screen, that is the original PCD that is actually in place today. It is for the Laurel Road Shopping Center. It would be a very similar project to the Plaza Venezia project that's immediately across Pinebrook. And then on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see a very similar graphic which depicts Sarasota Memorial Hospital's data. The data here, it provides information on uses. You'll see on the left-hand side there toward the top, there were 3 development parcels that were laid out as a part of the shopping center, and their uses were retail sales, restaurants, fast food, coffee shops, sit-down restaurants, alcohol sales, convenience store, including fuel sales and car washes, banks, financial institutions, hotels and motels. Most uses that you would typically see in a shopping center in a commercial general zoned area. You'll see on the right-hand side, sort of down number 8, proposed land uses. Phase 1 includes hospital, a 90-bed acute care hospital, and then also 60,000 square feet of medical office building. And then future potential uses, hospital, healthcare related facility, medical office, hurricane shelter, which is being discussed with the county of the viability for that portion of the project, but the applicant is aware of that, and medical and dental and veterinary office or clinic. So you can see that the uses have gone from significantly commercial to medical and hospital and healthcare facilities only. You'll see information there on prohibited uses. They're actually identical: residential, single family, multifamily, off-site signs, adult entertainment, and RV and automobile truck sales. Setbacks were provided with the original PCD. They did have some internal setbacks. However, the applicant developing a campus plan is only considering setbacks for the perimeter of this site and not the interior. There's information there on signage. You'll see some specific information on the left-hand side. The actual right-hand side, the medical facility, has a very detailed signage plan that is in the binding master plan. Open space, the PCD does require 20% of the property to be open space, and both sides were obviously compliant with this. And then finally, building height, you'll see on the left-hand side of the screen there towards the bottom, you'll see 85 feet. And the actual, on the right-hand side, you will also see that as well, up towards number 4 there, 85 feet. That is the height that is permitted in the PCD zoning district. So that will be the height applied to this project. On your screen is the actual concept plan for the Lowell Road Shopping Center there on your left, and then finally the hospital campus plan on your right. And I'll give you kind of an idea. You can see this original plan was laid out as a typical shopping center. If you follow my mouse along, you will see the outline for basically an L-shaped shopping center in this area towards the south end of the project. And then there were various out parcels that could be developed. As I indicated, very similar to the Plaza Venezia shopping center across the street. It was developed in much the same way. And then on your right, this is the Sarasota Memorial Concept Plan, basically a concept plan, or I'm sorry, a campus plan. You see the hospital located in this area with the emergency department here to the north, medical office building to the south. All these different parking fields. Obviously, this is a use that demands a lot of parking and a lot of staff parking in the rear of the building. See the areas in pink. This is actually phase 2 to come in the future. And then also the hospital has planned for growth, and you see these areas kind of in a tan color or a beige color for growth in the future of the facility. They also have a parking garage down here at the southern portion of the property and a central energy plant as well. You'll notice this area to the bottom here, which is devoted to open space in the green. This is actually the 170-foot wide FPL easement, and the only thing proposed in that area, as typically would be found, is stormwater control facilities. Just like any other plan development, the PCD does allow the developer to propose their own unique standards for the development of the site. Where modifications of the code occur, the applicant is to provide indication of specific code that is to be modified. There are no locational standards being modified by the proposed PCD, and most of the modifications apply to the city standards for parking, landscaping, and signage. These modifications were provided and addressed in detail in the staff report. I'll just mention a few of those. They are on your screen. The parking, they're asking for parking to be reduced from our standard 10 by 18 to 9 by 18. There are interior landscaping reductions that are proposed to be accounted for in other areas of the site. And there is, as you would expect, increased signage for this facility, especially in the interior. And there are also requests for some style changes. These modifications were all included in your staff report and will also be identified as part of the binding master plan, so we understand how they are applied in the future. Staff has reviewed the zoning map amendment for consistency with the comprehensive plan, and the analysis is in the staff report. The plan identifies PCD as an appropriate implementing zoning district for the future land use designation of mixed use corridor, and identified there on your screen are some of the land use strategies that the plan is consistent with. You'll see non-residential use are limited to commercial and institutional in the mixed use category. It does confirm that a campus style of design is compliant with that land use and also provides parameters for development that are consistent. It does provide for a maximum non-residential square footage of 5 million square feet. Currently existing in this neighborhood is only 132,000, so the additional added on by the hospital is well within that limit. Regarding policy 8.2, which you're all familiar with, we look at compatibility with the neighborhood. We look at land use density and intensity, building heights and setbacks, character and type of use, and we look at site and architectural mitigation techniques. We look at these in consideration of protection of single-family neighborhoods from intrusion of incompatible uses. There are single-family homes, as identified, large lot, single-family to the south of this property. However, as I also identified, there is a 170-foot wide FPL easement along that south property line that does provide significant buffering for this property, and they also have buffering along the north side of that easement. Only stormwater management facilities are proposed in that area along with that landscape buffer. Second being prevention and location of commercial or industrial uses. Proposed use is institutional, it's not a commercial or an industrial use. And then there are no non-conforming uses on the site today. And then finally, densities and intensities. Obviously, the development of the site will provide for more activity. The existing PCD allows for a whole range of commercial uses that are also very active, along with the proposed shopping center. Healthcare-related facilities are typically less intense than shopping centers, as was indicated in the transportation study for the project. The hospital structure will be much taller than other structures in the area. However, it has been located towards the center of the site with increased setbacks and other lower buildings surrounding, transitioning into the adjacent neighborhoods. On your screen are the mitigation techniques that I'm sure you're all familiar with that are available if any potential incompatibility exists. These techniques are more appropriately addressed at the point of site development plan than they were through the review of the site development plan petition with Planning Commission and have been in review concurrently with that site development plan. And many of these have been provided. There are perimeter buffers, as I indicated. The PCD requires 20% of open space. There's landscaping on the property more towards the exterior than the interior. There will be screening of mechanical equipment. I believe you're going to see a video today that you're going to see the applicant did a very nice job of locating the delivery areas and the service areas in a manner that you hardly even see when you're coming over the overpass. So they've done a real good job of that. Limiting access is limited to Laurel Road and Pine Brook. And tearing down the building towards when they get towards the perimeter of the property. Regarding the open space element and transportation element, as I indicated, they require 20% open space. They have indicated minimal impact to wetlands of 1.63 acres out of the 65 total. And that is in the southeast corner. They're maintaining, and they're going to actually be upgrading a wetland toward the southeast portion of the site. And provision for wildlife corridors, the easement for FPL provides a wide swath of land for that. Transportation, current roadway segments adjacent to the site are operating at level service C. Bike and ped are operating at level service E, and currently there is no transit route for this location. However, there may be one in the future, I would think. Regarding compliance with the city's land development code, the petition has been processed consistent with the code, and the applicant has appropriately addressed each of the criteria found in the city's code for rezoning. Sufficient information has been provided in order to evaluate each of those considerations. These are the considerations for rezoning. The applicant indicates that they feel they are compliant with each of those criteria. Regarding concurrency, the applicant has not applied for concurrency as a part of the zoning amendment, but has requested concurrency under the site development plan. Public facilities for water, sewer, and solid waste and stormwater have been evaluated. It has been determined by staff that there are adequate facilities to serve the site under the proposed PCD zoning district, with the exception of sanitary sewer. There is no force main proximate to the project site. However, the city plans to install a new sewer force main beneath I-75, which will be adequate to serve the property. In the meantime, the site will be served by Sarasota County until such time as the city can provide service. This has been memorialized in the developer's agreement in detail, and a full concurrency review has been performed during a review of the site and development plan. Have spoken with utilities. That project for that force main under I-75 is in process. There's going out for RFP or bids. I'm not sure at this time, but I have an idea that facility may actually be in place before the opening of the hospital. I can't guarantee that, but they're actively pursuing that as we speak. Regarding mobility, it is important to note that the applicant did use 200,000 square feet of medical office building in order to perform their traffic study. They're only constructing 60,000 at this point. However, they used that figure to identify any improvements that may be necessary for future expansion that could be understood and possibly completed now to avoid additional delay in the future, so they kind of overanalyzed the traffic. Listed on your screen are existing intersection deficiencies that are in place today without the project traffic. These will be resolved through some signal timing optimization in some cases. Also listed are physical improvements that are necessary today to correct deficiencies. For the purpose of the traffic study, the applicant can assume these improvements are in place since they are not caused by the project. These improvements will need to be identified in the city's capital improvement schedule and to establish timing and funding for these improvements to be constructed in the future. Impact fees and mobility fees can be used to fund these various improvements. In addition, there are some access improvements that are the responsibility of the developer that will be completed with this project. They're indicated on your screen, mostly dealing with turn lanes, an extension of turn lanes and those types of issues, and then some signalization when warranted. It's not warranted at this point, but when warranted. Finally, on your screen, the findings that were included in your staff report. Analysis has been provided to determine consistency with the land use element strategies applicable to mixed-use corridor, future land use designation. We've covered policy 8.2 and the strategies found in the Laurel Road neighborhood and other plan elements, and we would ask that you take this analysis into consideration upon determining comprehensive plan consistency. Finding of fact regarding land development code, it was consistently processed with the code, and they have provided answers to the criteria that were included in the staff report. Concurrency, as indicated, has been satisfied by the technical review committee, and as I indicated, sanitary sewer will be provided by Sarasota County until such time as the city is able to take that over. And then finally, mobility, their traffic analysis has been reviewed by the city's transportation consultant along with the county transportation staff and found to be in compliance with applicable traffic standards. Therefore, upon review of the petition and associated documents, comprehensive plan, land development code, staff report and analysis, the testimony provided during the public hearing, and the unanimous recommendation of approval by Planning Commission, there is sufficient information on the record for City Council to take action on zoning amendment petition number 18-9 RZ. Action to include the following. I do want to indicate the code modifications are part of the binding master plan, and they were included in your packet, and they are also included in the binding master plan. There's also one requested waiver of the sidewalk requirement along Laurel Road between the access drive, which is sort of centered in the property along Laurel Road, between that drive and the interstate. Yeah, I'm sure the applicant will address that as well, but it kind of walks pedestrians into some danger there with the southbound ramp and those types of things at Interstate 75. And Planning Commission did acknowledge the code modifications and recommend approval of the waiver in their decision. This concludes staff's presentation. The applicant is available to provide their presentation to you today, which I think will be very interesting for you. Staff will be available to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Questions of staff, Ms. Fiedler?
Yes, talk to me about the waiver of the sidewalk. The sidewalk is being waived only on one portion of Laurel Road, or is it being waived on all portions?
No, it's only being waived from the access drive to 75. They actually are providing a sidewalk from the intersection of Pine Brook and Laurel Road to the entrance off of Laurel Road to get pedestrians into the property, but they felt it was hazardous to include that because there are no pedestrian facilities going over the interstate, so they didn't want to walk folks into that safety issue, that safety hazard.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else? Roger, maybe just for clarification, because it comes up quite often, this is a PCD, and we have a lot of PUDs out there as well. There's a basic guideline for a PCD and a basic guideline for a PUD. But once you have that basic guideline, the applicants are pretty well writing their own codes for the development. And I think a case in point, and I guess I don't understand why, if they're able to do that, why we have to at the same time list all these modifications.
Understood. The applicant, the code actually indicates that they need to at least indicate to us where they are modifying the code. I think it's more of a consideration for the decision makers to see where they are modifying this codes, to have discussion if deemed necessary on any of the proposed modifications. And there was some discussion at Planning Commission regarding the modifications, especially the parking space size that typically comes up and is discussed. But it gives you the opportunity to at least see where they're modifying the code. And yes, they are creating their own standards. So basically, when they come in to do something on the site or a building permit or something like that, we're not reaching for the zoning code. We're reaching for the PCD. Anything that's not covered in the PCD obviously defaults back to the code. But for the most part, they've covered the standards necessary to complete their development in their document.
Well, it came close this year during the legislative session for preemption, where if a code modification was granted, I'm trying to search the word that they were using,
variance.
An exception.
It was variance.
Variance. If that was accepted in a project, then any similar building or any similar function within the city, not just within the area, within the jurisdiction, could automatically have that variance. What is the difference between what we're doing here and the variances?
Well, variance typically is a known quantity, and it's very consistent throughout many jurisdictions, has criteria that goes with it. Typically, it's where a literal interpretation of the code causes some type of a hardship on a property, and you have to have that hardship available. This is not the case in a PCD or a PUD. The applicant is actually looking at the development, looking at the land, and they actually have to have a lot of forethought to be able to develop their plan much further than a typical rezoning would be. They're going to provide the city with much more detail. You have much more predictability, and the benefit they get, that's one of the benefits of the city. You get that predictability, but the developer also gets some benefit as well. They get more flexibility in order to modify certain standards that work well with their community. They're already giving us open space. In the case of a PUD, it's 50% of the land can't develop. So in that case, they may need to modify some standards in order to accomplish that development. PCD, it's only 20%, but we're dealing with more of a commercial element here as well. It's not just a residential situation. So these are not, wouldn't be a typical variance that would require some type of a hardship to be established. These are just code modifications to assist a developer in developing his property. It gives him a little flexibility, and in turn it also gives the city flexibility, or not flexibility, but predictability in knowing this is what we're getting on the site. If it was just a straight rezoning, commercial general or something like that, they have all the uses of that zoning district available and aren't required to submit that binding master plan and don't have to think so far down the road as to what I want to develop on this property. So I hope that kind of answers your question.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll have a follow-up on that in a minute, but I'll go with Mr. Daniels.
Can you go back to the city's obligation slide on providing additional street coverage using impact fees?
Talking about the traffic improvements, Mr. Daniels?
I understood what they're going to provide, but there was a situation here where we have to provide something.
There we go.
I'll make sure I understand what we're providing.
There are, you want me to go over these? Or just,
yes.
These are existing, the traffic study, as I indicated, was done for a 90-bed hospital and 200,000 square feet of medical office building. Through the traffic study, it did identify that there are intersection deficiencies at these areas that are identified on your screen, and that those are in existence today. And they're going to do some modifications to signal timing and optimizing that timing so that they can improve some of those deficiencies. However, as I indicated, they're not the responsibility of this development. They exist today and are there now, and it's not caused by the development. And then these other improvements that are identified at the bottom here, these are identified that also need to be accomplished. They are also not the result of this project. These are there, whether this project gets built or not, and they need to be addressed. And these are something that I know you've seen the capital improvement schedule come forward. These are things that would be placed on that schedule in order for us to establish timing and funding for these different improvements. And these are areas where impact fees and mobility fees will be available to apply to these areas. But these are things that we need to know as staff where these deficiencies are so that we know how to apply those fees that we're collecting for these improvements.
And I understand that, if I might say this, and looking at the third bullet down, the Pine Brook Road at Venice Avenue, that is scheduled for work somewhere around $6 million, which has been approved by the county and FDOT. But I want to call our attention to the rest of these things. These have been submitted in our MPO FDOT 10-year plan, not in any 5-year plan. So if these are elements that are critical, and of course we submitted the plan before the hospital became a reality, then might I suggest that needs to be an action plan on our part, work with the county, is to change that to a 5-year plan. So I just want to call it to our attention because this stuff all has to be approved by FDOT and the county.
Don't get rid of that slide yet when you're done. Just.
What's that?
I don't want them to get rid of that slide.
Oh, good. Okay, yeah. That was my motive for saying this. We have, as you know, Roger, we have discussed in our long-range planning, linking up to Honore, starting at Pine Brook and Royal Road intersection all over the center road, making that a 4-lane with turn lanes. And we currently only have in the schedule the intersection of Pine Brook and Venice Avenue. And for some reason, the residents that's where you live, Chuck, decided not to change the intersection at Edmondson and Pine Brook. But in our 10-year plan, and having this hospital come in here, this is going to change our plan. So we need to make the county and FDOT aware of that. Thank you.
Ms. Cates?
Yeah, just regarding that slide there, that first bullet point, did you say, Bob, that is on the radar in the 5-year plan? The Pine Brook Road in Laurel?
Pine Brook and Venice Avenue, I think, Mr. Daniels.
Well, I guess I'm a little confused because Pine Brook and Laurel would have been exacerbated by the Honore, extension. So that's not at all on the county's radar to do that intersection. Do we know?
I'm not sure if it's on the counties. Like I said, the county was involved with the traffic study that we did for this project, and they indicated they're okay with the study that has occurred. Once again, they overanalyzed. They are not responsible for any of these deficiencies. So with the state legislation changes, they can pay their mobility fees and move on.
Yeah, and I understand that, Roger. I guess I'm just trying to think of how that whole area is going to function and try to get it, to be as smooth as possible. So I guess I have some concerns with it already being, a little overbooked in that area. So I guess I would need a little more information on the county side, what their plan is. Jeff's coming up.
Thank you. For the record, Jess Schramm, Development Services Director. I actually have a conversation with the county tomorrow regarding the JPA for that area as well.
My favorite. That's my favorite, the JPA.
It's, the county has some projects going on in that area as well.
Sure.
A lot of the issue is there's a lot of projects that are in the works. They're just not seeing the impacts yet. Mm-hmm. And obviously, as Honore was connected to that intersection at Pine Brook, early on, and as traffic's changing over time to address that new connection, there's no issues early on. And so what you're starting to see from the traffic studies and all the background traffic that's coming from projects that are already out there, you're starting to see some future issues. And this is why it's important to include these identified improvements into the capital improvement schedule, which is on your agenda for later. But obviously these projects, or these identified improvements here, weren't part of an approved project, so they're not part of that list yet. But that's something that needs to be updated more regularly than probably we have been, just to keep ahead of that curve as much as we can. It's really difficult to keep up on that, but I think also the county I think they're looking at that area as well.
Okay, and again, I would really hope they are, because I think we're going to have issues there, and I'm not blaming it on Sarasota Memorial. It's just it's a growth area. It's a great area, so everybody wants to be there. So that's my concern, is just how all this is going to be running as smoothly as possible, so that we don't run into I have a phrase that I can't use it here, but a lot of problems.
Ms. Fiedler?
And yes, and I would appreciate it if, when you talk to them tomorrow, you talk about Laurel Road all the way down to Jacaranda, because I think that is, you say it's an E now, and I thought it was an F, but isn't it down here listed as an E?
I think that was just the between Pine Brook and the interstate.
And then we're an F between the interstate and Jacaranda?
Yeah, that's the information in the capital improvement schedule. That's what's reflected now. That's a whole other conversation we can talk about later, but the county used the counts that we had from the county for 2017 in the capital improvement schedule, reflecting a count for the same set. It's the same count for the section of I-75 to Nice Trail, and then from Nice Trail to Jacaranda. The big difference there is that obviously you have 4 lanes all the way to Nice Trail, and then it drops to 2 lanes. My suspicion is that the count that was utilized was taken between I-75 and Nice Trail, because you have the big drop off in traffic going up Nice Trail past that point. And so I don't know if the capital improvement schedule, the information we had from the county's traffic counts, were completely accurate on that. Although I do think that Laurel Road does have issues, as far as we need to identify that as an improvement for a 4-lane facility.
Yes, just mention it tomorrow too. Thank you.
Mr. Daniels?
Just one last thing. Is the sheriff building their facility there at the intersection of?
That's part of the conversation tomorrow too.
Because they've cleared the land.
Yeah, that's their facility is kind of there right as the curve starts for on that, right as you start up on array there. So
yeah, I guess my only point I want to make is this: I'm not worried about the money, because the money's coming from mobility and impact fees, and my concern is the process that FDOT uses for approvals. And the first thing we need to do as a city is to get it in we need to change our plan. You can't ask the county unless you have a plan yourself. And our plan calls for this to be 10 years. So we need to change our plan and consider all these things that's happening here, that start the request process. And the county is really representing the city in the FDOT process. So anyway, thank you.
Mr. Cotero?
Yeah, I don't want to digress too much on this, because we can talk about it later when we're reviewing your capital suggestions for future improvements. I guess it's the second reading.
Yeah.
You are doing a transportation study of that
Correct.
area,
Yes.
which is going to be completed soon. So my guess is that would be a good basis to start.
To revisit the
this,
priorities of the projects.
The city and the county and MPO have the same priorities.
Yeah.
I think that would be very valuable. But regarding this project, it's going to have an extraordinary public benefit, no doubt. So my question has to do with just the ease of access. I understand there are road deficiencies, but I read in your staff report that since this is directly across from Plaza Venezia, in fact, the exits and entrances are almost directly across from one another, a traffic signal may be needed. but it's uncertain at this particular time. Considering this is also very close to the Laurel intersection, Pine Brook Laurel intersection, what would the timeline be to determine whether a signal would be needed there? Because that area is fairly challenged, that intersection is fairly challenged as we speak, even without the hospital. So I'm not sure how people are going to make a left on Pine Brook going south into the hospital without a traffic signal, while people are going to be also trying to access Plaza Venezia and the public shopping center. I'm just not sure if you can shed any light on that. And again, I'm only interested in, I understand there are intersection deficiencies and we have to address that separately. But for purposes of the next couple of years, you want people to have easy access, the public to have easy access in and out of there. How would that happen without a signal?
The short answer to your question is, obviously for traffic signals, there needs to be a warrant for the traffic signal. I believe in this case that the hospital's traffic study did not trigger the warrant. Now, that's a really good question. Their traffic consultant is here, and you might want to ask those questions as part of the applicant's presentation. Our consultant just reviewed their study and found that it was consistent with the standards for transportation reviews. But I believe there was not a warrant that was otherwise you'd have saw that improvement show up in there. You really need to have those warrants because that's the engineering basis, if you will, for necessitating the signal, and it just didn't show up, I think, in this traffic study. Now, you got to keep in mind too that there's still a lot to be developed out there. That's a situation that's going to need to be monitored. I think everybody recognizes there needs to be a signal there at some point in the future. But their consultant could probably give you a little better information on that than we can.
Sure. Because your staff report mentions that this would be assessed after the completion of Phase 1A. So perhaps the applicant can describe what that means.
Yeah.
And I believe that if I remember correctly from the Planning Commission meeting, that they are actually doing some improvements at the Laurel Road Pine Brook intersection that weren't warranted by their project, but I'll defer to them on that, but I believe I do remember that. So,
Mayor, if I could just, I know there was a question to Roger, the difference between the code modifications and variances. Just one little subtle but important distinction to be made there. A variance is given to a certain property for a specific project, and that is a variance to the standards of our code to that property. The code modifications are actually writing the actual zoning code that's going to apply to the property. So there's a subtle difference there, but that's a very important distinction to make, and I think that's important when you're thinking about the proposal to state law. I was monitoring that as well. I think that was clearly related to variances. You hear when a variance is approved, is that setting any precedent? I think that's where that state law was trying to go, was that if you approve a variance, it does set precedent. In this case, it's when you're doing a code modification and they're called out that way to let you know that they're proposing specific zoning standards to apply to this specific property that are a little different than the current or the standard code is. So little subtle difference. I just wanted to point that out.
I understand. That's why I needed that clarification. And I also found over the years that as the legislature starts picking on one thing like variances, all of a sudden the next year it's modifications. Yeah. So I want us to be very aware of it as well. I had two follow-up questions that on your background slide where it listed the roads, the intersections that you were working on. Why was Pine Brook Center listed? That's not even in the city.
that was more than likely, and I'll defer to the traffic engineer on this one, more like because of the amount of review that they did and expanded their analysis beyond what they were actually constructing, and they're going to 200,000 square foot. That may have impacted farther out.
Yeah, it's the study area where they're required to study is based upon the amount of traffic they're generating in relation to the capacity.
And if they didn't put that there, I wouldn't be able to ask you the question.
Yeah.
I thought so. The other thing that I wanted to mention we were talking about the modifications and the concern that I had on that when I was going over them, and I understand the PCD versus PUDs versus zoning. I understand that. But when you start getting a lot of modifications, it's telling me something. It's just like that one PUD that we had 16 stipulations. When you have a high number of something, it's telling me something. And I guess what I'm trying to determine is what it's telling me. And in this case, we had a total of 14 requested modifications listed in this PCD. But out of the 14, 6 of them were for signs. Almost 40-some% were just for signs. And I guess I'm going back to the amount of time that we spent on our sign ordinance in the city. That was, I think, before most of you were involved, but it was torturous. It was meeting after meeting after meeting on just signs, and now we have 6 modifications. What I'm wondering is, did we go too far in our sign ordinance that we have to get all these modifications for this project?
Well, I think I can speak to that, and I know the applicant will as well, but I think that's the modifications that they've requested regarding signage are very specific to the use of the hospital. And I think they explained it in their modifications, indicating understanding the state of mind of folks that are typically coming to this location. They have a lot of anxiety, whether they're a patient or whether they're a visitor or what they're doing. But they wanted to make sure that there was plenty of signage so at least they wouldn't be anxious about where they had to go. They would have very clear direction as to where the parking is, where's the emergency room, where's the entrance. And I think you're going to see a video that they're going to show you that really provides a clear view of access to this property. And the landscaping modifications they asked for kind of go hand in hand with the signage, because a lot of the interior, they reduced it somewhat in the interior, and they expanded on the perimeters, but they wanted folks to be able to see, to have those view sheds, to be able to see where do I have to go to get to where I need to be as quickly as possible. So I think the amount of modifications really relates in this case to this specific use and the aspect of how it functions.
All right, thank you. I have no further questions. Mr. Newsom?
This is a stranglehold on the obvious. But I just wanted to repeat something that was discussed at the Planning Commission meeting that I think kind of brings it into clear focus, and that is that this property was originally planned to be a retail shopping center. And so these modifications that are being done is to make it a healthcare facility and a hospital and healthcare facility. So that's really the difference. That's why the modifications are in place, and I know you probably have already got that. But just for the record, that's why this whole list of modifications are taking place. It isn't that the land development regulations are a hindrance. It's just a change from the use is such a dramatic change.
Anything else? All right, thank you, gentlemen. Why don't we, while the applicant sets up, why don't we take a break until about 25 minutes after? We will get started here in one moment. Okay, we can reconvene the meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you. Proceed.
Mr. Bailey?
Yes, sir.
Please go ahead.
Mr. Mayor and council members, I'm Dan Bailey and serve as Land Use Counsel for Sarasota Memorial Hospital. To my immediate left is Sharon Rouse, who is the president of the Sarasota Memorial Hospital, Venice. To her left is Steve Jackson of Flad Architects. To his left is Melanie Smith of Stantec, our civil engineer. Also like to acknowledge the presence of Joe DiVigilio, who is the chairman of the hospital board and also a resident of San Marco, the Venetian Golf and River Club. And I just want to start off by saying how grateful we are that the assistance we've received from your very capable staff, and also the encouragement we've received in terms of trying to bring this project in on time in October of 2021, including your accommodation to us, allowing us to proceed with some of the deep foundation work and the security agreement that we were able to enter into with you to assure that that could happen. We're also going to be doing construction plan review by a private reviewer, TLC, and they'll be working with your engineering staff in connection with that. We have three concurrent applications that Roger went over. Two of them, the special exception, the site plan approval, have already been acted upon by your planning commission. The rezoning, though, kind of is a summary of all those applications. And Roger has gone over these petition, the rezone petition, in terms of its compliance with the comprehensive plan and the land development code and concurrency mobility. We won't reiterate that, but having heard some of the questions you've had, we'll hopefully address some of your questions in our presentation, but to the extent we do not, we would welcome additional questions. But I'm going to ask Sharon to make some comments, but I want to first say that the draft of the ordinance is in your packet, and I'll have to say that is the most complete ordinance I've ever seen in terms of its level of detail. I don't know who to compliment, whether it was Laurie or Roger or Kelly, but no one's going to be left scratching their head wondering what you've approved. It's all there, and it's a great little summary of what you're approving as well. So, Sharon, if you would go ahead and make your comments.
We could go to the presentation. Thank you. So you have seen some of this before because it's been very much out in the public, but just to reiterate kind of some things that were even said earlier today, this is a project that is going to be here for many, many years to come. So we've taken as much time, I think, on the initial planning as how we want the campus to look in the future. So I think you're not going to see a great deal of change over time as we've done this presentation. But first and foremost, this project was focused on the patient and the patient's experience with our campus, with our hospital, and just having a healing environment. We also were making sure that the project is flexible and expandable. As you know, at the time we started this project, we had filed a CON. You might have seen that the CON legislation is going away this year, and so how that will impact this project down the road, it might accelerate things, although it's still undetermined. We also wanted to use nature as much as we can to enhance the patient experience. The use of daylight, the use of nature has been shown in many studies to enhance healing of our patients, and also to maximize the site potential. So this is a 65-acre campus. Sarasota Memorial Hospital right now sits on about 35 acres. We want to do a better job of planning so that we're not impacting the front entrance of the hospital like is currently happening at the main campus. So I think what you're going to see is our expansion plans have really taken into account the potential for the site. The campus, the hospital, is about 360,000 square feet with 90 private patient rooms and 20 observation rooms, which are really identical to an inpatient bed, 28 emergency patient rooms, 8 surgical suites, We have a medical office building attached, which is 60,000 square feet, central energy plant, a parking garage of about 425 parking spaces, and we continue to maintain a location for development of a hurricane shelter. The hospital will be a full-service hospital. We've been out meeting with the residents and the communities who are very anxious to have us there, and have come to expect a very high level of quality of care from Sarasota Memorial, and the expectation from the residents is that same level of care will be offered at this campus. It will include orthopedics, oncology, urology, neurosurgery, pulmonary, some of the areas that are not mentioned, general surgery, obviously, vascular surgery. So it's pretty much the services you would expect. Cardiac cath lab, laboratory, pharmacy, all the support departments that go into supporting a full-service hospital, as well as birthing and recovery suites. And one thing that is going to be very excellent for the patients is this campus will be seamlessly connected to Sarasota Memorial. So patient records will be easily transmittable between the campuses in a seamless fashion. Will also be hurricane hardened. So, you know, patients will be able to stay there during the event of a hurricane. We also wanted to make sure that we were listening to our communities, the surrounding communities. So we initiated last year a neighborhood advisory council, and we have had ongoing representation. We have a meeting tomorrow, as a matter of fact. Gene Hines was unable to be here today, but he is our chairman. Betty Antagliata from the Waterford is here. Jerry Jasper, Venetian Golf and River Club. Angela Myers, Tim Montgomery, I believe, is here today. Vicki Provencher from the Nokomis Area Civic Association. Sandra Terry from Laurel. Pamela Walker from Pine Brook South. And Roger Clark has been attending those meetings, just so that he can also hear from the neighborhoods.
You might have seen David Verender's guest editorial in Sunday's paper describing this neighborhood council process.
I think it's going to be a very good thing. It's something that it's not just during this planning, but we anticipate keeping this committee together for many years, because we know the hospital needs changes as well as the needs of the community, and this provides an excellent opportunity for them to, you know, present their concerns or, you know, what services are needed in the community. So,
okay, and then Steve, if you would go ahead and provide an overview of the project.
Sure, thank you, and Council Roger Clark, thank you for giving a tremendous overview. I commented to Roger a couple of times that he understands this better than some of our team members. He is really integral and on the understanding of the campus. But I'm going to kind of give you just a brief overview here of more of the parts and pieces and a little bit more detail within it. So Laurel Road's kind of on your left, Pine Brook's kind of on the bottom here. I want to point out two things here. As you go south on Pine Brook, the first turn is actually the turn into the Publix, right? So that's our main entrance into the Publix. Our entrance is actually a little farther down, and that was warranted by the DOT, backup and traffic, and Melanie can speak to more of the traffic stuff. But that brings our entrance to the campus a little bit farther, say south, than we actually had originally anticipated. But what that does is it gave us the ability to really maximize how we're using that site. So you'll see in a minute here how you kind of access the site and come in, and as soon as you drive in, you're looking straight at the front entrance of the hospital. Again, you know, as commented, this is all about the patient experience, trying to ease those concerns as they're entering the campus in a lot of different mindsets. So we really took that into account the whole way. So as you get to the property, which we situated almost center, but a little further east, very tactfully, there's a couple different parts and pieces of the hospital. So I'm gonna walk as you're coming up through, and then reiterate it with an animation here in a minute. But 11 there is a hurricane shelter. We're holding the site for the potential for that, trying to acknowledge where that might go. Then as you come up closer to the hospital, you've got number 2, which is the medical office building. As you come around, then the drop-off area is number 1, the main hospital, right? So those are our inpatient beds. That's the taller portion of the hospital. And then as you come around a little bit further, number 3 is emergency department. So if you can think of this as an airport, we're really trying to be tactful about the drop-offs, the sequencing, knowing where you're going to go, and I'll emphasize that in a little bit as well. It's all surrounded around number 10, which is a centralized water feature that is integral to the orientation from a vehicular perspective as you're outside the building as well as inside the building, and I'll touch on that in a little bit. We've got parking surrounding the site as well. If you go back to the main entrance, as you pull in just before the hurricane site, we have a service road. So if you're not a patient, if you're a staff member, if you're a delivery truck, if you're anything other than a patient, you've got the ability to quickly pull off from the main entrance, so then decompressing the main drives for the patients, and then that loop road takes you around the back. So that brings you to the number 4, which is the parking garage, number 6, which is a central energy plant, some staff parking back there, comes back around to number 9. Oh, this is a little bit bigger here. Thank you, Sharon. Number 9, which is the service area, and I'll touch on that in a sec here. There's a helipad just to the left of that. Number 5 is the ambulance canopy. So that back area is really preserved for the site service. There's future expansion in number 7. So we've already tried to outline what does this look like when we go to 270 beds. So that we're not building over the front entrance as we're doing today at the main campus, and it really doesn't disrupt any of the patient services. You might ask, well, why is this building tucked in kind of that corner? Well, as you may or may not recall, I-75 is level with the grade, and Laurel Road actually goes up over I-75. So by doing that, it creates about a 20-foot drop in the corner of our site. So that's why we chose that area for the service, because it really screens it and it gets it closer to where it needs to service things within inside the building. And you'll see that here right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a little drive. All right. So what we're doing is we're driving westbound down Laurel Road. You can see the hospital on the left there. So right now we're right about going over I-75. The top 2 floors there are the patient floors. You can just see the tips of the trucks at the service yard. So we're working with our landscape to help continue to screen that, but by the way that that's elevated, it really helps screen it naturally. As we come around, there's the ambulance drop-off here tucked behind. You can slightly see that emergency. So you can see as you come down Laurel Road, the hospital is prominent there, but not overwhelming. As we enter the site then from Pine Brook, this is your view and patient experience. So as you come in, you got a straight shot right towards the front door. Very important to us. But as I talked about the different airlines, the first pull-off is the medical office building. So it's got a safe, protective pull-off area for those dropping off, going to the medical office building. To the left here, you can continue towards the emergency department, or you go towards the hospital main entrance. Again, a safe, separate pull-off at the main hospital entrance. It's combined then with our patient discharge. So you go in one location, you come out of the same location more or less under the canopy. It's separated with a little green space, and I'll highlight that in a minute. So then as you then come back around, get on that main drive or come out of the drop-off area, here we start pulling off then towards exiting or to the emergency department. So that fast track emergency, it's the last point, but it's a very quick turn to it. And this is, again, a safe, separated drop-off area. So really trying to make sure that anybody who's visiting the site in any state of mind has the ability to understand where they're going, pull off, do what they need to do in a very safe environment, separated from other cars that are moving within the site. A couple things I want to highlight here before it, or it'll switch quickly. So on the left then is our emergency department. So you can see then the emergency signage on separate sides of the canopy, and then the back side of it is the ambulance canopy. Right, so you've got the ability for the ambulance to be connected across the building. It's also the furthest north and closest to Laurel Road. So important for us, if you're in an emergency state, to get to that emergency room as quick as possible. So it's as close as we could get to Laurel Road and that entrance from there. So if you're a patient and you don't go and use the valet and drop off and you decide to park, right? So you might park in this middle parking area, which is the patient parking. You'll start then to walk towards the building. This is kind of the entry sequence as you start to do that. So we've parked, we get on a safe sidewalk, walking right towards the building. I was talking about the centralized water feature as a place of reference. This is it. So you will actually be walking through the water feature without getting wet, but it brings you then in between the patient discharge and the main entrance. So we separated those, and we're bringing you into the screen space. So if you are dropping off, you're not also, if somebody is dropping off, you're not trying to walk through their cars, through the doors opening, etc. So trying to separate those a little bit better. And then it's right to the main entrance. So we'll get into the main entrance in a little bit. I just want to highlight again how we've been thinking about the patient safety, security of the building, and the ease of wayfinding. So here again emphasizes that pathway through the water feature, through the centralized kind of green space which separates the hospital main entrance and the patient discharge in two separate safe drop-off areas for each. So we spoke with you all, I think it was in September, about the height variance. Again, very important for a hospital to minimize the steps within for the patients. So as we've used this and started looking at how we're stacking the building, this is what you would typically see in a hospital like this. So the first ground level is your public. So you've got your emergency department, but then you've got the other public amenities such as imaging. You've got your main lobby, your dining area, your food kitchen, registration, that sort of thing. We've got some administrative offices there as well. The second floor, again, fairly typical, and you want to elevate it, is your procedural area. So that's where all your operating rooms are, the cath labs, and then all the supporting spaces to help those things run. So your PACUs, prep stage 2 recovery, sterile processing, all of that, as well as our LDRP. So labor and delivery, those rooms are on the second floor as well, with a couple of C-section rooms. I'm going to skip the center. And then your top two floors are your inpatient floors. So one of the strategies that we've used is to put the mechanical floor in the middle of the building. That way we're reducing some of the distances for the air movement, so it gets it directly to the spaces that it needs to as quick as possible, but it starts to elevate the inpatient room. So those that are in an inpatient room get a better view by being elevated there. So trying to maximize how we're using the building, giving it, again, to the patients and not the mechanical units. So as we've started to develop this gets you a sense of how the building is stacked and arranged. We've also started to think about, well, what is the patient experience entering the building? So this is kind of that. So you walk in, you walk directly into the registration. Security is a very important thing. I want to make sure everybody that comes in goes into and registers so everybody knows who's in that building. Off to the right then is the registration for the patients. To the left here, just outside of the registration and security desk, is the lobby. So two-story space, not very big, but it feels bigger because on the outside we step back that canopy and add that green space. Then to extend that lobby and make it feel a little bit larger, we've connected the dining area to it. So it's opened up through a wider corridor. So you've got your coffee bar, you've got your servery, and then a nice dining area. So we're trying to really maximize how we're using some of the spaces and have them interconnected. That to the left then also brings us out to an outdoor dining space. So you can start to see kind of how that's connected to the lobby a little bit there. Straight ahead is some of the staff offices on first floor, but then similar to a lot of other instances, you come out towards the exterior. That glass that's on the exterior orients you to the outside, so you know where you are in the building. So very much a very important wayfinding technique that we're using. So everything